Hi, and welcome to Decarbonize Fact Checks the Internet. Of all of the videos I've done, my most popular one has been Peter Zeihan Doesn't Understand CleanTech. So when I watched Power Outages in Texas and Growing Energy Demand by Peter Zeihan, I knew it was time to make a second video about him. As is usual with Zeihan, I agree with his conclusions, but the path to get there is a bit tortured and includes a lot of unnecessary and inaccurate digs at California and the green transition.
Hey everybody, Peter Zeihan here, coming to you from Colorado. We're going to talk today about Texas because back on the 28th on Sunday, the electricity regulator of Texas called ERCOT warned that there could be rolling brown and blackouts on the 29th of April. The concern was that the temperatures were already expected to nudge up above 90 degrees in some parts of central and southern Texas. Now, at the end of the day, it wasn't too bad. We just had a few sparks and brownouts here and there. The issue here is twofold. First, the one I can't do anything about, and that's climate change.
Yes, you can. My channel is full of things we can all do about climate change. Zeihan talks about the end of globalization and demographic problems with a timescale of decades. He should think about climate the same way he does about those other issues. What are the long-term risks and how should we be mitigating them now? That's what I'm doing with my channel, and it would be great if he included climate in his analysis along with Chinese demographics and Russian geography.
As Texas is getting warmer, as the population is expanding and people are moving into warmer and warmer areas, you're seeing more pressure on the system writ large. Electricity systems can't transmit as much power when it's hot. In addition, things like water coolant systems for, say, nuclear power plants don't work as efficiently. So hot actually doesn't just mean demand goes up. It means sometimes supply can go down.
I mainly agree with what he's saying about Texas. He's totally right about the challenges in hot weather, which is why building non-thermal plants like solar and wind can create a more robust grid, since they don't require any water.
The other problem is more industrial and is going to become a bigger and bigger and bigger problem moving forward at a much faster rate than anything that climate change does. As the Chinese and the European systems crack, the United States is going to have to enter in a period of extreme industrial regeneration. Well, in the case of Texas, you got a triple bind here. You've got the energy transition, which is more electricity dependent. You've got a population explosion as people move to Texas because it's a cheaper place to live. There's no taxes, land is cheap. Food is cheap. Electricity, until recently, was cheap. And so you've got just a broad spectrum demand build, and then the manufacturing renaissance on top of that. So I would estimate that the Texans need to actually double the size of their grid, preferably within the next 10 to 15 years, and we have never had that kind of build out before.
If the electrical grid doesn't keep up, the reindustrialization will go elsewhere. No one is going to build a factory in a state with a flaky electrical grid.
Now, there is a problem here in addition to just the sheer numbers involved, and that is the regulatory structure of Texas. It is separated from the rest of the national grid. It regulates itself, and connections between Texas and the rest of the country are very slim. So when Texas enters into a period of abject shortage, the only solution for it is to overhaul its regulatory structure to bring in new power systems or to link up to the rest of the grid, which means some federal regulation will come into play. The Texans really don't want to do option B. The problem with option A is that the Texans are going to have to change their ideology of power management. Right now, the way ERCOT regulates the space is you can only charge the ratepayers money 4 times when a power plant is actually operational. While that sounds kind of obvious, the problem here is when you deal with situations like, say, peak demand in the evening, you have to bring in a lot of peaker plants. Is to penalize companies that build systems that are not used all the time. Thing is, when you get into surge demand situations, that just means the grid goes down. And that is an entire model that they're going to have to reimagine.
Agree 100% that Texas needs regulatory reform. I would argue that only option B will work, especially as climate change becomes worse. When it's so hot or dry in Texas that the thermal plants that require cooling water can't operate, they'll need to import power from a different region. I have a video on this topic, and there's a link in the description. If Zeihan had only talked about Texas, I wouldn't bother making this video. The only thing I disagree with him is his option A versus option B, and Zeihan is arguing they'll probably take option A, while I'm arguing they'll regret that and eventually choose option B. So there's not much disagreement even there.
Now, people will, of course, point to California as the counterpoint, and I'm not saying that the Californians have figured it out either. California has decided to go whole hog into the green transition and pull out all the coal out of their system and now as much natural gas as they possibly can, and they're starting to make some crazy claims about having a largely carbon-free grid, and it is a lie.
But on California, I'm not sure anything he said isn't demonstrably wrong. California does not claim to have a largely carbon-free grid. Data from the California Energy Commission in 2022 shows that they got 36% of their electricity from natural gas, the single largest contributor. This is followed by solar at 17%, wind at 11%, nuclear and large hydro at 9% each. There's a link to all of this data in the description.
The Californians are really bad at math. Basically, every time the sun goes down, every day, they turn on this 11 gigawatt capacity cluster of lines that connects Los Angeles to the Arizona border, and every bit of electrons that are coming in from Arizona is fossil fuel driven, primarily natural gas and coal.
These numbers explicitly include imports from the Southwest and the Northwest, which is why the coal contribution is high as it is at 2%. The contributions from the Southwest are over half renewables and nuclear, and the contributions from the Northwest are primarily renewables and nuclear.
Overall, California imports over 1/3 of its electricity. They just don't include that data in the math.
When Zeihan says they import 1/3 of their electricity, I don't know where he gets that number. I calculated 28%, so maybe he's just rounding up, but I'd say that's closer to 1/4. And 40% of that comes from the Northwest, that's primarily renewables and nuclear. And the imports are definitely included in the math. Now, if Zeihan claims to know more about the California electrical grid than the California Energy Commission, he needs to show his receipts. If you're going to accuse a state government of lying, you should offer at least a hint of what the truth is and how you know they're lying.
So it's not that California has really gotten green, it's that California has simply outsourced its carbon emissions. Both California and Texas, I would argue, are now operating on a model that is failing, and both of them need to get overhauled. Texas, however, is the one where this is going to be a desperate issue, because no one is really thinking, I'm going to build a manufacturing plant just outside San Jose. No. All that sort of stuff happens in Texas. So the demand build is going to be explosive, and it's going to force the Texans to make some uncomfortable decisions and some very large investments very soon.
I agree with his take-home point that Texas needs dramatic regulatory reform, that climate change will make this harder. I'm not an expert on reindustrialization, but what Zeihan says seems reasonable to me. As I stated above, I think if they choose option A, which they probably will, they'll regret it and eventually end up with option B. What he doesn't mention is there's also a lot of badly needed regulatory reform happening at the federal level. And if Texas gets over itself and plays nice with the rest of the country, the level of investment needed to achieve a robust and growing grid will be significantly smaller. Check out this video if you want to know how.